In today's intensely competitive television industry, a graphic artist who can respond to production requirements with speed and imagination is an invaluable asset. Imagination is the prerogative of the artist, but the speed with which it's transferred to the screen and the freedom with which it's expressed are dictated by the tools at the artist's disposal. All of the graphic images in this program have been produced on a new system, the Quantel 7000 digital paintbox. Designed from the outset to present imaginative graphic artists with the benefits of electronic image generation and to allow them to use new technology to extend their imaginations even further. To make this program, we've invited 3 top-flight working graphic designers, 2 of them quite new to the system, to test it by responding as they individually see fit to a demanding television brief. A brief they would be unlikely to fulfill satisfactorily in the time available using conventional materials. But first, here's a short taste of the variety and quality of television image that can be produced on the Quantel Paintbox. Stencil, graphics, painting and airbrushing, cut and paste, typography, animation, and retouching all are part of the capability of the Paintbox. Much of the work you've just seen was created by Martin Holbrook, a graphic artist whose background is in conventional commercial studios, but who, in the recent past, has been an integral part of developing Paintbox to ensure that working artists can benefit from all the advantages of electronics without feeling any constraints imposed on them as they swap their familiar workbench for stylus and electronic tablet.
Having a background of traditional graphics over 20 years or so, working with just about every medium, to suddenly come across a whole new area of digital graphics is rather exciting. We're quite pleased that we now have a machine that responds very adequately to the sort of things that graphic designers do in their daily work.
Hi, yeah, no problem. Storyboard's here. You can come down anytime and have a look at it.
Bob English is a television graphics designer who's new to Paintbox. After many years at the BBC's television centre in West London, Bob is now senior graphics designer with Britain's new national television station, Channel 4. Terry Hylton is also new to Paintbox. a graphics designer currently helping to pioneer breakfast television in the United Kingdom. Hylton, English and Holbrook have agreed to take part in a unique experiment to test the flexibility of Paintbox. The scenario for the exercise is this. It is early afternoon, October the 19th, 1781. Television technology has been transported back in time over 200 years, and we watch as three competing television stations prepare to transmit the first reports of the surrender of British forces under the command of Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown. For the early evening news bulletins, now only hours away, the onus has fallen on the station's graphic designers. With scanty background material, plus access, of course, to standard reference sources and the Quantel digital paintbox, these men must now interpret their newsroom's briefs as each station strives to present a particular and individual angle on what is already recognised as the story of the decade.
This script that I'm working on is typical of the sort of work I come across every day, sometimes with more reference material to work from. There wasn't a terrific amount of reference material, and it seemed rather daunting, and I initially looked at it to see a page and a half of script to be completely covered with graphics. Initially, I was rather thrown by it because I didn't know what on earth to do. But with a small amount of thought and a bit of imagination and a small amount of experience on the Paintbox, especially with the new features on it, it's allowed me to do something which I'm quite pleased with, and I think puts the story over in a very informative and interesting manner. If this script had been brought to me before I had the use of a Paintbox, obviously I would have had to look at it in a totally different manner and would most probably have said I can't do it because there wouldn't have been the time to have handled the job. There hasn't been any technology for graphic designers, new technology introduced into television since Lecture Set, most probably. And I was very keen to get my hands on a Paintbox because I'd heard a lot about it. And I couldn't believe when I actually did get to handle one how flexible it was and how, working current affairs as I do, how it reduced our, working time.
When handed this story, obviously I'd go through the script and check out various sequences and try and put it together in a logical order so that all the images would hang together. And obviously one takes the best images one can from the reference available, which in this case was a bit skimpy. I think sometimes the images need strengthening, and of course the Paintbox will allow you to play around with them. The very nitty-gritty issues of television design can be made to be very attractive using this machine because you can chop and change. If you don't like something, you can do it again, and it's very quick. Trying to do that any other way would be impossible because you're actually producing artwork. If you don't like it, you end up throwing it in the bin and having to start again. Of course here, that doesn't happen. Animation, there's another positive advantage that to do that on film again, you through the same old problems of sending it off for processing, coming back, having to wait for it. I mean, you just couldn't tackle a story like this using conventional techniques. In fact, the end result doesn't need to be any different. The good thing about film is that you end up with a good end result, and there's no reason at all, having worked on this machine, that my end result needs to be any different. In fact, that's the plus point in its favour, because it's not giving a poor quality result, it's in fact giving as good a quality result.
You don't reinvent the wheel. Paintbox does replicate some of the things you can do, all of the things you can do in your traditional graphics studio, ranging from the darkroom right through to the simple pencil. One of the joys of the Paintbox, of course, is that it speeds this sort of work, maybe by 200 or 300%. You can work incredibly quickly using the sort of things that you've been able to use in the past. But there are things here now which are presented to us, animation, for example, or the handling of type in a very advanced way, which is not really possible for the designer to do before. And I think the machine is behaving, in a sense, very much like the entire graphics department would behave in a crisis of this nature. We can illustrate, we can treat photographic material, we can retouch inadequate reference material. We have typography to our fingertips. You can also storyboard in the normal way. You can develop material exactly as you would using traditional media, but in a very much condensed time scale, and what you're doing is working directly in the television medium, so that what you see on the screen is your visual, if you like, is your artwork. It allows the designer to control A, the quality of the image, and B, the presentation of the image, and the presentation of a series of images or an animated sequence absolutely at his fingertips.
Transmission time is here. The work must now go to air. Let's see now how the early evening news might have looked 200 years ago if the world then had had television stations serviced by the Quantel digital paintbox.
Good evening. Reports are coming in of a collapse of British forces in Yorktown, Virginia. This afternoon's dramatic news follows 2 days in which British General Charles Cornwallis has sued for peace. Dealing direct with his Allied counterparts, American General George Washington and his French comrade-in-arms Jean-Baptiste de Rochambeau, Cornwallis has sought complete immunity for his men if they return to England and never set foot in the colonies again. Reports from Yorktown tonight suggest these conditions have been set aside and the heavily outnumbered British forces have accepted unconditional surrender. Our London correspondent quotes English Prime Minister Lord North as saying, "Oh God, it is all over." English King George III, however, gave us this reaction: "The war must be carried on, though the mode of it may require alteration." Let's look at the numbers of troops in the field. 7,300 British soldiers, plus 800 sailors, with 7,800 French regulars, plus 5,600 Continentals, with more than 3,000 Virginia militiamen ranged against them. It's clear the Allies' position was strong. But tonight, the French, who have 37 ships alongside the 9 Allied vessels also threatening Yorktown from the sea, are claiming this victory for themselves.
Well, as soon as the producers, directors see how much work we can do and at speed and good quality, obviously our workload is going to go up, which means that we're going to become more visible, more upfront, and perhaps more recognised for our abilities. At present, they're perhaps a little afraid of what we can do because we tend to be isolated, working behind the scenes very much, whereas now our talents are going to be seen up front, and I guess out of that we're going to get more work, and it can only be good for the design industry, particularly within television.
First this evening, the complete background to the Allies' victory at Yorktown. The trapping of British General Charles Cornwallis in a small Virginia hamlet is the culmination of a campaign which started 18 months ago with the fall of Charleston to the enemy. Further British successes at Camden and Guildford Courthouse followed as Cornwallis swept north through the Carolinas. Once in Virginia, the British target was the 1,500 American troops at Richmond under the French Marquis de Lafayette. Retreating in the face of the British advance, the Richmond forces joined up at the Rapidan River with General Anthony Wayne and 1,000 Pennsylvania Continentals, plus 450 fresh recruits under General Friedrich von Steuben. The British diverted to avoid a clash, checked Lafayette, now in hot pursuit, at Jamestown, and headed for the sea to supply much-needed troops to the beleaguered British forces in New York. The embarkation point the Allies chose, a commanding position on the York River, was fortified with sufficient earthworks to hold off Lafayette. But the 7,000 British soldiers in Yorktown could not hold out against Lafayette, plus the French fleet from the West Indies under Admiral de Grasse. 37 vessels plus 9 other American ships alongside, plus 12 battalions under George Washington and Jean Rochambeau, secretly dispatched from the New York area to concentrate the Allied offensive on Yorktown. Outnumbered on land and sea, the Yorktown garrison, apparently without their commander, surrendered this afternoon. British Commander-in-Chief Henry Clinton, based in New York, blamed London for the Allied victory. It all rested on a fleet, he said. Sir Henry Clinton was promised one. The French actually had one.
An absolute knockout as far as the designer goes is that the machine is very easy to pick up. I mean, although I'm still learning about it, I learned a lot of it within the first 2 weeks of getting hold of the stylus. It never ceases to amaze me as a piece of equipment, because the different ways you can find round a solution, working with colleagues at work, two people will suggest a completely different way of doing something, and both of them will be right. There's sort of no right way of doing anything. It's just very, very flexible, and different people use their own paint box in their own particular way. It obviously hasn't got a style of its own. It can, you know, it's very neutral, because it picks up however you want to handle it will be reflected in what comes up on the screen. That's not dictated by the paint box itself, it's what you put into it. It's very user-friendly, because the controls are absolutely suit us idiot designers.
The waiting is over. At 2 p.m. today, Eastern Standard Time, Cornwallis surrendered. Tonight, primetime news reveals how a communications failure has led to a major British defeat. This afternoon's surrender by 7,000 British troops was overseen for the Allies by General George Washington. British Commander Lord Charles Cornwallis was not present at the formal ceremony. Even now, it is uncertain whether the British general realizes that in his hour of defeat, help was on the way. This afternoon in Yorktown, Virginia, troop dispositions looked like this. Inside the fortified hamlet with Cornwallis, 7,300 British soldiers with 800 sailors standing by to man the British ships in the waters of the York River. Facing them, 17,000 allies made up of French regulars, Washington's Continental troops, and Virginia militiamen. On Chesapeake Bay, 46 Allied ships, 37 of them French. Outnumbered, the British capitulated. But reports tonight reveal that just outside the Chesapeake Bay at this minute are 25 British ships bearing from New York a further 7,000 troops under British Commander-in-Chief General Henry Clinton. While the French claim the credit in today's encounter, there must be many British prisoners tonight in Yorktown feeling that this day luck has played them a cruel blow.
Though the paint box was developed clearly as a television tool, its uses beyond the industry are manifold, both in advertising, for storyboarding, for example, or presentation, or production of video, generally, in graphic design, for print and publicity, specifically for generation of visuals and artwork. And even in industrial use, for anywhere, in fact, where high-quality images are useful, for example, in flight simulation or military target simulation. It really has endless applications, even beyond the television industry.